I'm Nima Rajan. The outgoing mayor of Faro, a small and remote Yukon community, says yesterday was a very sad day. Leonard Faber says he had spoken to the RCMP in the wake of an active shooter event in the town of 400. Premier Sandy Silver says in a release that there were multiple victims, adding that the Mounties took decisive action and arrested a suspect. Incoming Mayor Jack Bowers was due to be sworn in as mayor yesterday when news of the shooting came at noon. The town was put on lockdown for the next 3 hours. Environmental groups have commented on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's latest cabinet choices. They say it sends a signal that combating climate change and transforming Canada's economy will fall to more than just one department in his Liberal minority government. Jonathan Wilkinson was shuffled from Environment to Natural Resources. Stephen Guilbeault was moved to Environment from Heritage. Mr. Wilkinson's pre-politics background was as the CEO of multiple clean technology companies. And Mr. Guilbeault, who was the director for Greenpeace in Quebec, will take on implementing a range of new climate promises. As BC healthcare workers dealt with yesterday's deadline for full vaccination against COVID-19, the province announced a plan for all eligible residents 12 and up to get booster doses by next May. BC's health minister called yesterday a solemn day. This as nearly 4,100 healthcare workers missed the deadline for mandatory vaccination. They were placed on unpaid leave before they could potentially lose their job. There are currently over 4,800 active COVID infections in the province. Experts say the pandemic might be partly to blame for an uptick in random assaults, as reported by Vancouver police. Police reported more than 1,500 unprovoked stranger assaults between September 1st, 2020 and this past August. Colton Fair, an assistant professor at Simon Fraser University's School of Criminology, says COVID-19 has put a lot of significant pressures on people and may have also worsened the mental health conditions of many. A University of Manitoba political scientist says the Trudeau government has diminished the representation of the prairies in the federal cabinet. Royce Coup says Winnipeg MP Jim Carr is out, and Winnipeg MP Dan Vandal and Edmonton MP Randy Boissonneau have relatively minor cabinet posts. Mr. Carr had served as Mr. Trudeau's special representative for the prairies since 2019 as he underwent cancer treatment. Before that, he served as the minister overseeing energy and non-U.S. trade, which are two complex files. Premier Jason Kenney says Alberta voters have delivered a powerful message to the federal government on fiscal unfairness. This by voting in favor of scrapping the principle of equalization. The results from the province's equalization referendum revealed 61.7% of those who voted wanted to see the principle of equalization removed from the Constitution. A second referendum question to keep daylight time year-round failed by a close vote of 50.2% to 49.8%. Saskatchewan lawmakers will be back in the legislature today for the start of the fall sitting. Lieutenant Governor Russ Mirasti will lay out the province's priorities in a throne speech this afternoon. Premier Scott Moe has suggested his government plans to focus on crime, growing the economy, promoting exports, and discussing Saskatchewan independence. The opposition NDP says it plans to question the government over its handling of the fourth wave of COVID-19. Ontario's health minister says the province will be ready to roll out vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds as soon as it gets the okay from Health Canada. Health Minister Christine Elliott says vaccination plans differ between the province's 34 public health units, but schools will likely play a large role. Premier Doug Ford said on Tuesday that he wants everyone to get vaccinated, including healthcare workers and eligible children. But Mr. Ford said he understands if parents may not want their kids to get a shot. The province of Nova Scotia has passed legislation banning protests that block access to hospitals and other healthcare facilities. The Protecting Access to Health Services Act establishes a 50-meter safe access bubble around hospitals, clinics, and doctors' offices where protests won't be permitted. Nova Scotia joins Quebec, which adopted a law banning COVID-related protests outside schools and hospitals. Mad Canada has launched its Project Red Ribbon campaign to promote sober driving throughout the holiday season. The charity says red ribbons and car decals are reminders to everyone to plan ahead for a safe ride home. Starting on Monday, the charity, police, and other emergency services will begin handing out red ribbons to the public. MAD says this year's campaign honors Chloe Kaniasis. She was a mother of 2 young sons who were killed by an impaired driver in November 2014. All right, we'll be back after the break with a look at ESG investing. That and more news coming up. ESG seems to be the trending word in financial markets as big companies gear toward the interests of socially responsible investors. ESG, or environmental, social, and governance investing, has increased in recent years as issues like climate change, social justice, and other non-financial factors are influencing investors. The COVID-19 pandemic has also boosted the rise of socially responsible investing, or SRI, and impact investing. Well, joining us now to talk more about the ongoing theme of conscious investing is Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Great to see you, Nima.
So we're seeing ESGs a lot in the world of investing. So what exactly is ESG investing, Brendan?
Well, I think the point is ESG is not exactly anything. It is, as you say, an emphasis on environmental, social, and governance. And what those 3 things mean can mean different things to different people. Environmental tends to be a synonym at this point for global warming, but it doesn't have to be. So a lot of the E part has been of late, many investors, particularly institutions, have decided they're not going to invest in fossil fuels. Social is how one has an impact on the greater community. And it can be at one extreme from child labor to, or not using child labor, to other good that you try and do within society. And governance is, again, from the extreme from taking bribes to how your audit committee looks. There is a whole the whole spectrum in each case, and different investors have different emphases on different areas.
So what are some of the ESG trends that you're looking at right now, Brandon?
Well, ESG is, before it had a term, before it had a moniker to it that everybody has latched on to, our firm has always been about investing in companies that at their very core are trying to make a product that does some good in the world. Rather than saying we don't do this or we don't do that, we want to look for companies that do some good and, from the governance perspective, whose managements actually do what they say they're going to do. So for us, the social part of it is that we're trying to buy companies that don't hurt their best customers. So we have never, for 40 years, bought alcohol, tobacco, gambling companies, because those really actually seek to damage the people that use their products the most. So companies that look to provide a socially beneficial product or service.
Now, I've also heard the term impact investing, so that sounds a lot similar to ESGs. What exactly is impact investing, Brendan?
No, I think it's a little bit different, actually. ESG is don't stop it, no, we won't. Whereas impact investing is, I'd like to make a difference in this world. I think that this kind of investment is really going to change things. So I want my money to be aligned with my values and investing in things that are going to make a difference. And what that difference is, again, can mean different things to different people, but you can do it both in the public sector and in the private sector. So whether you're investing in companies that have a new solution for the environment or are making a difference from a social impact point of view, or have developed a new technology, you're trying to make an investment to make a difference rather than just saying what you won't do.
All right, Brendan, so we've got impact investing, we've got ESG, and we also have SRI, or socially responsible investing. What would you say are the key differences between these terms here?
I don't know there are different labels. I think what's important, though, for investors and for our advisors is to understand what impact, what socially responsible, what environmental impact they would like to have. Because you'd used a wonderful phrase in introduction, a conscious investing. I think many people invest to the extent they do unconsciously. But if you're actually taking the time to think what matters to you and aligning one's own investment approach with how one actually invests one's money, then I think you're actually going to end up with a better result. It's a modern day extension of what Peter Lynch, the famous money manager in the 80s, had said about buying buying a company whose product you know something about. If you're buying an issue whose product you know something about, you're probably going to do better than the market as a whole.
All right, Brendan, just about 30 seconds left, but let's jump to personal ESGs and how they relate to individual investors.
Well, that's, I think, what I was talking about a moment ago, in that if you are aligning your own investment philosophy with what you believe personally, I think you're going to end up with a better result as an investor because you've done what you suggested at the beginning, been conscious about the investments that you're making. And this is something I think you can talk over with your investment advisor.
All right, Brendan, thank you for that. We'll be right back, everyone. All right, welcome back. Our weekly market update is next with Catherine Murray, the host of The Buck Stops Here. Take it away, Catherine.
Thank you, Nima. Hello and welcome to your weekly market recap. I'm Catherine Murray. Well, somewhat surprising news today that sent the Canadian dollar higher versus the U.S. dollar, up by about a half a percentage point or so. The Bank of Canada opened the door for an earlier rate hike versus the consensus expectations, suggesting that we could see the BOC increase the benchmark overnight rate in the second quarter of 2022 versus expectations for the back half of 2022. They were also very clear that they ended their quantitative program, meaning pulling some stimulus or easy money or liquidity out of the economy. The big question economists will be debating is, are they too early and too optimistic about the Canadian economic recovery? And if so, could the BOC, the Bank of Canada, make a policy mistake and actually cause a recession by pulling back stimulus too soon? That's been the biggest concern in Canadian markets as well as U.S. markets. Interestingly, they lowered their global and Canadian growth forecast for this year while raising inflation expectations. This type of scenario, lower growth, higher inflation, has had some investors concerned that we might see stagflation, where your income isn't growing, but your costs are. Time will tell on that front, but that is still a hotly debated topic. In the near term, what this might mean for you, or what it will mean for you, is to expect higher rates on mortgages as well as auto loans and credit cards. The move also seemed to cause the TSX to sell off a percentage point or so, as a higher rate environment can put pressure on equity valuations. At the same time, though, the TSX has been higher for the past 14 sessions and seeing some record high closes. So perhaps the market is just taking a little bit of a breather here. We're also, of course, keeping our eyes on the price of oil, or WTI. It is trading a little bit lower. That's the first time we've seen that occur since last Thursday, and perhaps also lower on a bigger weekly inventory build. This is also weighing on the TSX sector today, the energy sector that is, and of course, obviously, the TSX as a whole. We're also watching gold, which has been trading slightly higher today. In terms of stocks to watch, CIBC downgraded Canadian National Railway from a buy to a neutral. And Restaurant Brands, which is the owner of Tim Hortons as well as Burger King, was downgraded to hold from buy over at Argus Research. In terms of corporate Canadian news, the focus has certainly been around the Rogers family and control of the company. That drama there continues to occur. The press reporting that the Rogers family first supported the ousting of the CEO, Joe Natalia, but then Loretta Rogers said her son misled her on his performance. The BC court will hold a hearing this coming Monday, November the 1st. The last look at the stock, I did see it trading higher, perhaps recouping some of the recent losses, again, on the family drama news. Meanwhile, as we look at those U.S. markets, they are in fact mixed. We are seeing growth stocks outperform value on the back of some big tech bellwethers' latest earnings results. Google, for one, that stock is up by about 4%. Revenue and operating profit beating expectations with strength in search. Strong cloud business results is helping to push Microsoft's stock higher. And then we're also, of course, keeping our eyes on the music streaming company Spotify. That stock's up by about 6% today, following better revenue and earnings in their latest quarterly reports. In terms of the takeaway from stocks and away from tech stocks, consumer names are performing well following their results. McDonald's, for one, beat expectations, revenue, earnings, and same-store sales all coming in higher versus analyst expectations, with particular strength in sales in the United States as well as in international business. Interestingly as well here, some of the surprise at the upside was actually driven by growth in larger order sizes and also the company's ability to increase prices. We also are seeing Coca-Cola's stock perform well. They also beat expectations in their most recent quarterly results. As we look at the markets and where we go from here, the path of least resistance for the U.S. markets has been higher, despite concerns about peak earnings, supply chain bottlenecks, and rising inflation. As we look at these earnings results, one can definitely see the companies that continue to garner demand for their products and prices that are able to be passed through to the consumer, despite having to see these input costs increasing. They seem to be winning the game on the margin front. And in corporate news in the United States, Pfizer vaccine has been approved for young children. Lastly, what I'm watching will be the FOMC next week at their meeting. We'll see whether or not they also move forward their rate hike increases like the BOC did today. If they do, expect the U.S. dollar to increase, Canadian dollar to decline. That does it for me. Nima, back to you.
All right, thanks for that, Catherine. For more analysis and news on the markets, tune into Catherine Murray's show, The Buck Stops Here, on the News Forum Network. All right, after the break, we'll take a look at stories happening around the world, so stay with us. A G20 summit scheduled for this weekend in Rome is the first in-person gathering of leaders of the world's biggest economies since the COVID-19 pandemic started. But the two-day event isn't business as usual. While Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is expected to be there, the leaders of Russia, China, and Mexico won't be attending in person. And there could be tensions as the leaders of the United States, Australia, and France sit at the same table for the first time. This comes after Australia decided to buy submarines from the U.S. instead of France. The G20 event is also serving as a preamble to the bigger United Nations Climate Change Summit in the UK. It begins as soon as the Rome meeting ends. China says participants in next year's Winter Olympics will be strictly isolated from the general population and could face expulsion for violating COVID-19 restrictions. A Beijing 2022 organizing committee official says those taking part in the Winter Games beginning February 4th must remain in a closed loop for accommodation, training, competing, transport, and dining. The European Union's top court has ordered Poland to pay €1 million a day. This is over the country's long-standing dispute with the bloc over judicial independence. The Wednesday ruling by the Court of Justice came after the EU's Executive Commission asked for financial penalties. This was to ensure compliance with a ruling from July. The court said that the penalty was necessary in order to avoid serious and irreparable harm to the legal order of the European Union. A study commissioned by Greenpeace shows that over one-third of the busiest short-haul flights in Europe have viable train alternatives which are far less polluting. The environmental group called on European governments today to boost train travel. This so fewer polluting planes are flying over the continent. The study showed that 34% of the 150 busiest short-haul flights have train trip alternatives of less than 6 hours. Sudanese security forces have detained 3 prominent pro-democracy figures. This as internal and international pressure mounts on the military to walk back a coup. The overnight arrests were confirmed on Wednesday by relatives and activists. The detentions came as protests denouncing Monday's takeover continued in the capital of Khartoum and elsewhere. The coup threatens to halt Sudan's transition to democracy. The process began after ousting longtime ruler Omar al-Bashir in a 2019 popular uprising. A Brazilian Senate committee has recommended that President Jair Bolsonaro face a series of criminal indictments. This for actions and omissions related to the world's second highest COVID-19 death toll. The 7-4 vote by the 11-member committee on Tuesday ends its 6-month investigation of the government's handling of the pandemic. It calls for Mr. Bolsonaro to stand trial for a wide range of charges. More than 600,000 people died of COVID-19 in Brazil. President Bolsonaro denies any wrongdoing. All right, well, meanwhile, Iran's president is saying that a cyber attack that shut down gas stations across the nation aimed to get people angry by creating disorder and disruption. Ebrahim Raisi's comments, which were the first since Tuesday's attack, did not blame anyone specifically for the incident. However, he suggested anti-Iranian forces were behind the cyber attack. He said there should be serious readiness in the field of cyber war, and related bodies should not allow the enemy to follow their ominous aims to make problem in trend of people's lives. Hundreds of McDonald's workers in a dozen U.S. cities walked off the job yesterday. This to protest what they say is a continuing problem of sexual harassment and violence in the company's stores. McDonald's says there are plans for mandatory sexual harassment training at all of its 40,000 stores worldwide starting next year. But some employees say that's not enough. They cite a lawsuit filed last month by a teen employee who says she was raped by a manager earlier this year. New Zealand's government says it will expand a vaccine mandate to include thousands of workers who have close contact with their customers. This is including those at restaurants, bars, gyms, and hair salons. The changes will mean that about 40% of all New Zealand workers will need to get fully vaccinated against the coronavirus or risk losing their jobs. Speaking with reporters on Tuesday, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said she didn't believe the new rules were an overreach of government power. She said they ensure customers and employees are treated equally. New Zealand is aiming to get 90% of all people aged 12 and up fully vaccinated to put an end to lockdowns. Lululemon is unveiling its kit as Team Canada's outfitter for the 2022 Olympics and Paralympics. Transformation was a prominent theme as athletes preparing for the Beijing Games modeled the gear at a Toronto hotel. Ski cross racer Brady Lehman says he's a fan of the new kit's quality and feel. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Take care, Canada.